Hello. Several years ago, I filmed a video. This is one of my early driving videos back when I wasn't doing it safely. And I called it Why I Live in North Dakota. And, since then, I have actually changed quite a lot. I'm not even 100% sure if I would have moved to North Dakota the way I am now, but here I am. And, the truth about me is I've always lived in a rural area. By the way, this is all filmed in March of 2016. I'm headed down Highway 85 right now. I'm going to do a little jumping at the beginning because you'd fall out of your seats in boredom if I tried to show you this whole drive. Excuse me. But anyway, I've always lived in a rural area. I was born in Potter County, Pennsylvania. Lived in near a town called Shingle House. Moved south to Halifax and then back north to Coudersport, where I graduated high school. So small towns. I spent 4.5 years in college at Grove City College, which in the great scheme of things is a small town, although for me that was like, whoa, coming to the city, dude. And student taught at Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania, which again is not large. And then I taught for a little while in Potter County. But then I moved on to North Dakota, which I've been in small towns there my whole time. I've lived for a few weeks at a time in Fargo or Minot, but a lot of people consider them small towns if they're not from North Dakota. So anyway, I've just wanted to start a series of videos about rural America. And it's easy to paint rural or urban America with a broad paintbrush and stereotype and so on. But it's not realistic. There are all sorts living in all sorts of areas. But you can generalize a bit. In general, you're more likely to find this in a rural area. So that's kind of what I want to talk about. So it's kind of funny, my trip down, this is actually my trip to Rapid City to get my laptop repaired, where I found out the business was out of business. So I ended up mailing it off. But this is also the day I filmed my video where I toured downtown Rapid City. We're pulling here into downtown Buffalo, South Dakota. Highway 85 runs right through it. Buffalo, South Dakota is a good example of a very rural town. It's a town of about 350 people. County seat of Harding County. Harding County is, very rural. And I will say they built a new school, which impresses me. It's a nice building. I'm not exaggerating at all. That's one of those buildings you look and go, wow. Small, but they don't have a lot of kids, and it's far enough away from anything. It's not like they're going to send their kids somewhere else to school. If you drive around Buffalo, though, you'll see a lot of abandoned buildings. Till recently, you would have seen the abandoned old school, too, but they did something which I wish more towns would do, is they weren't using the buildings, so they took it down. I just hate to see buildings sit there in disrepair. That's where the old school used to be. It was built in the Great Depression. Just could not be modernized. But you'll see Buffalo, there's a lot of abandoned buildings on Main Street. They're further ahead than my town on that whole deterioration thing. They're a lot smaller. And that's kind of a thing going on with these small towns. They are shrinking. Rural America, exceptions in certain pockets, of course, but overall, rural America is struggling. Yeah, see, here's Main Street. A lot of businesses on it are closed. I pulled into the post office here. You can't see it through the window here, but the inside of that post office is really cool looking. It looks like a new building from the outside, but it's an old one. So that was just kind of a neat little thing. You'll see me, I had some stuff I had to mail, and rather than wander through my town to find the post office, I just thought, hey, Buffalo's on the way, I'll just drop it off there. So that's what I did. But I want to get into all these rural areas and just talk about some of the challenges and some of the reality of a rural area. And today's video isn't going to be so well researched. I do have some research here. Today I want to talk more about personal opinion and some of my impressions just from having lived in these rural areas. And then in future videos I will talk more about some specifics and more well-researched specifics. And it's actually on this route, not today, but on this route I'll go through, well, I'll kind of kiss Deadwood, South Dakota. I will go through Leeds, South Dakota. And those are two towns that were decimated by the end of the gold industry and really show what happens to rural America. Now, there are also two towns that show a glimmer of hope because they really capitalized on the gambling industry. Now, I'll just lay it out there. I do not like the gambling industry. I think gambling is a tax on people who can't do math. But these towns are revived. Here now, I'm going to head into Newell, South Dakota. I wasn't planning a small town video when I filmed all this, but I just thought, hey, why don't I drive Newell, South Dakota? And I wanted to hit Rapid City first on this trip so I could get my computer dropped off, which, again, didn't happen because stupid business was gone. But I'll tell you what, it's been nice ever since having a fully repaired laptop to work with. But anyway, Newell, by the way, is a town of about 600. It's a little bigger than Buffalo. It's outside of Sturgis, far enough to have some of its own businesses. Close enough not to have maybe as many businesses as it could. When you drive through Newell, one of the things I noticed that you don't see as much in North Dakota, a lot of unpaved streets. In North Dakota, a lot of your even your very small towns have paved streets. Newell, that's not the case. Main Street is paved and one or two others, and that's pretty much it. For whatever that's worth. Newell is another town that has shrunk. I mean, when you look at the links about these, I'm going to do Wikipedia mostly just because it's quicker than saying, here's a link to the census website, good luck. But Newell has shrunk quite a bit, and you notice a lot of abandoned businesses, abandoned homes, again. And I lived in towns like this where just everything is drying up. I feel like I'm living in one now. Admittedly, there is still hope for my town. It's not that small, but it's a reality that I don't think a lot of people get. A lot of people have a very bucolic view of rural America. You know, the pretty quaint small towns that you see on the TV shows. And then, of course, there's the other side. You have the people who see rural America as a bunch of ignorant hillbillies. So I want to just add some data to it more than anything. I don't think I'm an ignorant hillbilly, and I think it's unfair to paint an area with a broad brush. You know, how do you describe New York? How do you stereotype New York City? You can't. How do you stereotype rural America? Well, I'll tell you what. Rural North Dakota, rural South Dakota, different world from, say, rural Mississippi or rural Massachusetts or rural California. And even within the state, there are a lot of differences. I took you through the Standing Rock Reservation in a driving, well, I guess in a few driving videos. That's rural America. But that's a very different rural America from where I live. So don't paint us all with a broad brush. I'm pulling back out here on the highway. This is... Oh, no, I'm not. I don't know where I am. I'm still in Newell. I didn't write down the highway, but this is the only highway through Newell going north and south, so look on a map. Anyway, I'm going to pause here because I already need water. Now, to be clear, my rural experience is basically Pennsylvania and North Dakota. I know people in other towns, I know people in other areas, but that's where I've lived. It's rural. So anything I say about the South or anywhere else, basically, it better is not through personal experience. It's going to be through reading. And the fact that I'm coming to you this way through the internet is kind of a testament to the rural part of America I live in. As much as I may criticize North Dakota, my parents who live in Pennsylvania still do not have high-speed internet. They want it, especially my father. I don't think my mother quite gets what it is, but my father wants it. But they can't get it where they live. The only thing they can get is some kind of a satellite internet that's just ridiculously expensive. Where I live, you talk to ranchers out in the middle of nowhere, and I drove you through the middle of nowhere last week in the Fairview Bridge video. You talk to ranchers out in the middle of nowhere, they have fiber optic internet. So, yes, there are a few places in North Dakota where it's still being installed, but we're very connected. But there are a lot of parts of rural America where that is not the case. We're quite lucky here with cell phone service too, because it's North Dakota, it's flat. Most places in rural North Dakota have cell service. Now, admittedly, I'm on the western end of North Dakota. We don't have it's more spotty out here, but we have the problem that you see in other parts of the country, which is topography. Town next to me, Rame, actually does not have cell coverage because of the buttes around it. Marmarth, I can't remember if Marmarth has cell coverage or now, but again, it's down in that valley. But overall, we have it. Now here we're driving into Sturgis, South Dakota, which is another possible response to being rural. This is a town of about 6,600 people. Swells to quite a bit more than that. During the famous motorcycle rally, it gets taken over. And I have never been to Sturgis during the motorcycle rally, and I don't think I want to. The place is just packed with motorcycles. And I am told, especially if you're in a car, it can take several hours to get through Sturgis. A lot of the people that live there rent their house out to somebody, and they go on vacation during the rally. And that's not as dangerous as it sounds, because most of these people are like, hey, I'm going to take care of this because it's a place I can come back to. That right there is an example of the problem. That is a humongous bar that a town of 6,000 people cannot manage to fill. A lot of businesses in Sturgis are geared for the motorcycle crowd. You can't see it, but on our right we're passing another bar, and on your left, on your right there's one, you could see the one on the left. All huge bars. And what about the off-season? Sturgis has some other events. I know they do a classic car show at some point in the fall, because I've accidentally went to Sturgis once when that was going on. They do get traffic at other times of the year. They're right on the edge of the Black Hills. So they get some of that traffic. They're on the interstate, which makes them easy to approach. Bear Butte is there. But yeah, it's that week or two of motorcycle is Sturgis's big thing. And that's what some towns have done. They've really promoted a big event in order to survive. But then it starts to sap away at your culture. When your town is centered around that big event, then it becomes not so much for the people who live there, but for the people who visit. And who wants that? But it's a solution. Marmarth, North Dakota, which I drove you through last week in the Fairview Lift Bridge video, does its own motorcycle rally every year. They call it the Bottoms Up Run. I've never been to that one either. I don't do motorcycles. But yeah, they come there for a weekend. They camp out down kind of where the turntable used to be. And I guess it's reasonably well policed. There isn't a lot of law enforcement in Slope County, which is where Marmarth is. But they must be making an effort. And usually they do that same weekend as the Slope County Fair, which I don't understand. With only 2 towns in your county, why can't you coordinate? But whatever. The people that put on the fair say, hey, At least we know the sheriff will be over in Marmouth, and we can do what we want over here. And believe me, they do what they want in the Slope County Fair. I have seen a few things that just like whoa, but I haven't been to that in a few years though. In fairness, I was gonna go this year, but then I just was sitting here at home, and I just like, you know, first week of school, I don't want to go out, so I didn't. But anyway, that's another solution. A lot of towns try to do some kind of festival. My town does a 3-on-3 basketball and a classic car show on the same day to get people in. We have kind of a lackluster county fair. High school rodeo is probably our biggest one because we host the state high school rodeo. So, what about industry? But before I mention that, I guess I want to say something about rural life. I'm pulling out on Interstate 90 here. I am so glad I don't have to face this every day. I hate driving on interstate. I hate driving where there's lots of traffic. This isn't a very highly trafficked interstate, but still. I just don't like this kind of driving. There are some people for whom this is every day. One thing I don't like with rural America is you do have to drive everywhere. There is no mass transit. But, pause for another drink, I guess. You can thank me later for pausing there. While I was paused, I looked at the video I had up here and I said, really? So I just deleted a whole bunch of interstate driving. I was going to drive you all the way from Sturgis to Rapid City, and I just said, no. So this is where I was at the mall parking lot, whatever it's called in Rapid City. I can't remember. I don't go there that often. Hardly ever. But I knew there was an Apple store there, but it's gone. Yay. So I drove out of there with a broken laptop screen. Which, again, is now fixed. Because I mailed it that next week. Because I said to heck with it. I'm going to lead you through Rapid City, not because it's that amazing, mostly because it just kind of shows a contrast. Rapid City is a city of about 70,000 people in kind of western South Dakota. It's right in the Black Hills. Very good location. If you've come to see Mount Rushmore or the Black Hills or anything, you probably have. Rapid City has been involved in that trip somehow. It's hard to avoid it if you're coming in from outside. If you drive in on the interstate, you go through Wall, South Dakota, which is neat to visit once. Badlands there are worth visiting again and again, which I'll do someday. But then you get Rapid City. Rapid City is where the airport is and all that stuff. And Rapid City is an example of what happens when you have enough people. Because if you don't have a lot of people, you don't have a lot of workers earning money, which means you also don't have the businesses. Now you can probably hear the train. That is not in Rapid City. That's here where I live. But you don't have the... Let me start that over. The train really distracted me. You have all these workers... And then they need services. They need food. They need restaurants. They need bars. They need clothes. They need, all the different businesses that you need. And so more people live in Rapid City to serve them. And of course, they have an effect too. They also need services. So that adds a few more businesses. And what you get is a nice little economy where you have lots of people, lots of different businesses, and they're all serving each other. And it's good to go. When you get really small, like a place like Newell or Buffalo, you might struggle to keep one restaurant open. I lived in a town once that lost its grocery store. There are just not enough people to keep it open. Then you had to drive 30 miles to a grocery store, which is ridiculous. I don't live there anymore. I mean, now I whine that they've moved the grocery store off Main Street. Back then... Yeah, 30 miles to get your damn groceries is a real inconvenience when you live in town. And that's one of the things you actually are finding when you start studying these rural towns, is these people are really cut off. I was talking to somebody from New Salem, North Dakota. New Salem, it's a small town, a little smaller than mine, but it lost its grocery store. I guess, well, I won't say why. That's gossip. But anyway, they lost their grocery store. And a lot of the older people in town kind of depended on that grocery store. Bismarck is 30 miles away, and then Glen Ullin is 30 miles the other way. A lot of these older people are driving to Glen Ullin for groceries because they're just not comfortable driving in Bismarck because they're older. So there is actually, I guess, somebody trying to open up a new grocery store in New Salem, actually on the main street, because the old one was out by the interstate. So I'm hoping that that happens. I once looked at a job in New Salem. It wasn't quite what I was looking for. I didn't like the fact that it was so close to Bismarck. I didn't like the fact that a lot of the teachers there actually lived in Bismarck and commuted out. So anyway, I didn't apply. But the moral of the story is, well, there is no moral, but when you have enough people, it becomes a lot more self-sustaining. Now, Rapid City is not an island. Tourism is a big part of it. The various industries in Rapid City are a part of it. And they sell to outside Rapid City. But the thing is, there's enough people there to make it vibrant. Back before travel was easy, a lot of towns had more businesses. And because they had more businesses, they had more people and more of other businesses and so on. But the automobile really killed a lot of those small towns. If it just takes 15 minutes to drive to somewhere bigger, then people do it. I mean, that's what killed the grocery store in the town I used to live in. To me, 30 miles is a real inconvenience because I like to walk everywhere, but I'm weird. Most people that lived in that town of 400 and some people drove to work. In fact, I was the only one that walked to work. I'm usually the only one that walks to work. They drove to work. So it's really not an inconvenience just to drive over to the next town, half hour away. And that's part of why that killed the grocery store there. Now, I will say, in that town's defense, the grocery store was reopened and it is doing better. I think people realize that, oh, yeah, we can drive over there, but it's real inconvenience not to have it here. So now I'm driving into downtown Rapid City. I'm going to make a left-hand turn up here where I should have turned right, but I didn't know. I've never come into Rapid City from the north ever. And so I had my turns memorized, but I didn't realize that, oh yeah, they're backwards because you're coming from the other direction. Whoops! So I ended up parking and then doing a lot of walking, which if you saw my Rapid City video, you saw a lot of Rapid City I never expected to visit. Although I did find out where the School of Mines is, so there is that. I have a student who goes to the Rapid City School of Mines, and yeah, I had no idea it was downtown. That was awkward. But anyway, so I'm going to park here. But this just shows just the variety of businesses you can have. Now, one thing even cities are starting to face is the danger of online shopping. Now, I'll admit it, I'm an online shopper. Try to buy a fountain pen in the town where I live. Just try. Try to buy a decent pair of shoes in the town where I live now. I used to buy them in my town. Damn it. Try to buy, well, decent clothing like I wear to work in town. Now, you can't. So I shop online. I do have to buy some shoes because, well, my school shoes kind of fell apart last spring and I didn't replace them. And then school started this year. I'm like, oh yeah, because I'm wearing these fancy dress shoes that are super uncomfortable and my back is just on fire from standing in them all day. Um, True story. So, yeah, I'll be online shopping to replace them. So I pulled over here, got out to shop. I headed straight ahead there. Should have gone the other way because I really wasn't that far away from it. Didn't know. So got to see a lot of Rapid City I'd never seen before, I guess. So Rapid City is not small by any means, but I am aware that a lot of people see it as a small town if they're from a state with a larger population. I just remember last year we had a French foreign exchange student who came. He was in my chemistry class, and anyway, he mentioned one time that he was from a small town in France I'd probably never heard of, and I said, "Oh, how big is it?" He says 40,000 people. That's a small town. Remember I said Rapid City is about 70,000? So, really, Rapid City, although I love going there, is not that big. And I don't know if I'd want to live there. It sure is fun to visit. And I'm not much of a one for shopping. It'd put me in a mall and it's just like, get me out of here. Because malls are boring. If I go into a mall, it's because I need something. Usually clothes. Malls seem to have a lot of clothing stores. So I go in, go to the clothing store, buy the thing, and leave. I don't get these people that do recreational shopping at the mall where they just go in to see what's there. Just, ugh. Or they go to Walmart just to shop. Just something to do. Ugh. Now, I will admit, though, I say that, and yet, put me in a used bookstore, I could spend a couple of hours, especially if it's got a good selection. And I know a lot of people are saying, used bookstore, ugh. So I guess we all have our thing. For me, it's books. Other people love clothes. Other people like to look at trinkets or jewelry or whatever. I've always thought, if a mall could be made a more social place, then it might have some advantage. But I remember it was a trend for a while to take out seating in malls, so you'd be up and moving instead of sitting and talking. I remember when I was a really little kid, the Colonial Park Mall actually had a playground for kids inside of it. That was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Then it got taken out. And I don't know, I was too young then to understand, so I don't know if it was taken out for liability or if it was taken out as part of their push to get people shopping instead of sitting and watching the kids. Who knows? Early 80s, I guess liability was starting to be more of a thing then, but I was too young to appreciate it. By the way, on your right, it's kind of a neat restaurant that I've never eaten at, but I would like to. It's made in an old fire hall. So, one of these days. What I need to do, actually, is go down to Rapid City and just stay for a weekend. Just haven't done it. That's something I just need to do more, is just get out, stay somewhere overnight, and really explore it. I enjoy it when I do, I just don't do it very often. And did you notice all the red lights? My county doesn't have a single red light. None of the counties touching my county have a single red light. Different world. I will also say, I just heard a vehicle go by, but it's a lot quieter here than it would be in a larger city. I've listened to Stephen Brown's reviews when he was still over in the Netherlands, and it's just constant road noise out his windows. Mine are open too. I don't think he had air conditioning in that apartment. I know I don't here. So we probably both are doing the same solution, which is have open windows, but yet it's pretty quiet. For him, it's not. And I don't think I could stand that constant noise. I've heard of, you see the joke in the movies of people with bringing tapes of traffic noise just so they can sleep. What was that movie? Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. And the character played by John Cusack brought along a tape of city noise, city traffic, so he could sleep in Savannah, Georgia. It was funny. I don't know if that movie had too much to recommend it. It was kind of drawn out and... yeah. Anyway, this is a movie review, so why don't I get back on topic? So I think I mentioned early on that my Why I Live in North Dakota video was one of my most popular. It really didn't pick up until the DAPL pipeline protests. And I think a lot of people were like, wait, North Dakota? That's a state? I don't know anything about it. So they were on YouTube and wherever looking for information about North Dakota. I won't claim that video is one of my proudest moments because it is poorly made. Back then, hate to admit it, but it's true, I was recording video using my iPad. So I'd only do it on gravel roads and never when a vehicle was coming. So I figured the only person who's going to get hurt is me. Would never have done it here. So that's the nice thing with the dash cam. But I went through a lot of things like what I just mentioned about the traffic. I'll be honest, I was to the grocery store today, and of course it's moved out of town, so I had to take my flippin' car. I didn't lock my car in the parking lot, and while I was there, the front door and the back door of my house were unlocked, because, I mean, not that it's unsafe, but the probability of getting robbed is pretty low. But truthfully, it's a lot safer in cities than people think. There's just that stereotype. Also, when you drive a car like mine, a 17-year-old Toyota Camry that's a stick shift, nobody's going to look at that and say, I bet he's got a nice stereo. They just don't. And, you have to have a car thief able to drive stick, too, to steal it. So I'll lock it if I go somewhere else, but I don't spend too much time worrying. But again, cities are not that much more dangerous. Now I'm thinking about these houses here. Of course, this is pretty hellish with all this construction going on. But it must be noisy for them on a busy road like this. But then I was talking to somebody who's visiting her granddaughter who's just moved into a house on Highway 85 here in my small town. And same thing, they had their windows open, and this lady says, I just couldn't even hear, because it was car after car after car. It was just so noisy. So, yeah, maybe you don't win even in a small town. Although I think on my street I do. I'm hard boiling some eggs, so I might get up here in a minute. I have to make some salad tomorrow, so I need eggs for it. But anyway, I was thinking about traffic a little bit while I was up getting another drink of water. Actually, this time it's not water. Use your imagination, but it's fermented. Anyway, I gotta start chicken too. Sorry, but that's okay. It's not quite time to start that yet. But anyway, I was when I was a little kid, lived out in the country near, like I said, Shingle House, Pennsylvania. It was actually on a dirt road near Honeoye, Pennsylvania, which is like a suburb of Shingle House, if you can call it that. Then we moved to Halifax, and this was suburban living. We were right on Highway 147, which had a lot of truck traffic. Now, I remember it. My mother says when we first moved there, I would have been 4. My brother was 2. For the first week or two, we just stood by the front window as a big picture window, watching the traffic go by. And I remember traffic waking me up. My bedroom was on the side of the house toward the highway. You get a truck go by and they do, what is it, Jake brake? I'm not even sure what they do, where it goes, and it would wake me up. But in a lot of ways, I did get used to the traffic, so maybe I would. Then after my 8th grade year, we moved up to Potter County to Coudersport, out in the country again. It was on a dirt road, a lot quieter at night. And that's kind of what I got used to until college, where I was living in a dorm, and had to get used to constant people noise and constant light. I do not. I know why streetlights are there. I don't like them, but I know why they're there. I just don't like constant people noise, and I always wonder, why do you need to run your engine so loud? There's somebody who goes by my house now every morning, about 5 or 5:30 or so, and loud engine. Of course, there's a stop sign out front of my house, so, and then when they take off from the stop sign, they gotta, because it's a loud engine. What are you proving? Are they like these idiots to do the coal rolling? You've probably seen that, where they do something to their diesel engine so it gives off lots of black smoke as exhaust. And they're all like, hit, got that there, hippie, with our coal rolling. I don't know. I don't even know who it is. Maybe he's doing it because of me. Maybe he's just doing it because there's a stop sign here. I don't know. But I usually set my alarm for 5 anyway, which I hope he doesn't hear this. And I'm assuming it's a he. But I set my alarm for 5 because my thing is I like to get up early. I'll read the news a little bit. The iPad is right there beside my bed, so I get up early, read the news a little. Then I get up, grind my coffee, finish reading the news, take a shower, water the garden, and walk into work. And breakfast is in there too, and I usually cook a decent breakfast. But anyway, we are way off the topic of rural America, aren't we? So we're headed out of Rapid City, and I'm actually going to press pause here because I definitely should tell you what road this is. Oh, I know what road this is. It's called the Mount Rushmore Road. Holy cow, duh. Because this is, if you want to go to Mount Rushmore from Rapid City, this is the road you take. Durr? Speaking of durr. And also speaking of durr, I don't know why. It's an unfair stereotype, but I tend to use a southern accent when I'm making fun of dumb people. And there's really no correlation there. And I know that. I live in a rural area, and a lot of people, rural is synonymous with stupid. So I should be more careful. Although I do kind of enjoy doing my southern accent, but whatever. So anyway, we're in the Black Hills here. You can definitely see some signs of forest fire. Forest fire is a thing. And actually, right now where I'm living, we've got a lot of smoke in the air, and I can smell it. And that's probably why I've been drinking so much water this evening, is the smoke is from fires, forest and otherwise, over in Montana, blowing over here. Here in North Dakota, we'll get fires. I've actually mentioned the town of Bucyrus had a fire, burned up. But generally, towns or fires in North Dakota buzz through and they're gone because it's mostly there's hitting stuff on the ground. We don't usually have them lasting days or weeks like they do in other parts of the country. Okay, so anyway, you can tell it's a major tourist highway because it's 4-lane highway. But I'm drawing nearer to what I'm planning to be my stopping point. And I'm actually really hoping that the dash cam picked up a bridge along this road. So, yeah, fingers crossed. But anyway, rural America is facing some problems. And I think there's been more attention drawn to it lately because of the election of Donald Trump. Now, you'll know he lost the popular election by 3 million votes, although he'll claim there was several million illegal votes in there, but, who takes that seriously? So he lost the popular vote, but he won the Electoral College, which is a system I would hate to have to explain to somebody from out of the country. So maybe that's why I teach science. But a lot of his votes came from rural areas. In the United States, rural votes count for more in the Electoral College. And so there is a clear cultural difference. When you look at surveys of who voted for who in the rural areas versus the urban areas, there is a difference. Majority of rural areas went for Donald Trump. So who lives in these rural towns? What do they do? I was asked that when I showed several of the rural towns on my way to the Fairfield Lift Bridge. I don't think we really went through many on the way back. On the way back, of course, Alexander and Watford City, what do? Oil. But one of the things these rural towns are facing, which I'll get into more, demographics. Their population is aging. And I face that. That's part of why I'm here. Honestly, the school where I first taught, the town that lost its grocery store, I was sure would not be here at this point in my career. They're still hanging on, but they're a lot smaller than they were when I was there. Schools are closing because there's no kids. Now, the oil kind of slowed that down for some of these towns in western North Dakota, but it's coming back. It's a reality. And when you move to western North Dakota, do you look at the tiny little town without a grocery store, or the neighboring town of 1,500 or 3,000 that has a store in a downtown? Not hard to choose there. These really small towns will attract people who are looking for low-cost housing. I lived in a town for a while where I ended up buying a house for $10,000. That kind of blows my mind, even now. Because that Camry I drive, I bought used for $10,000 the same year. What? So I sold the house for a profit. I sold it for $18,000. Camry I still have. But, I just think if I would have stayed in that town and kept that house, it would be paid off now. But I do think I'm better off where I'm at. Okay. But yeah, aging. I didn't know this. I just associated it with states, not necessarily certain areas. But there's an obesity and health crisis in rural areas. I had the vision of, people in rural areas are working hard. They're working outdoors. They're working in factories and so on. But yeah, there's a big health problem and obesity problem in these rural areas. And medical care is kind of lacking. I mean, my town just built a brand new hospital. So I thought they were on good financial footing that they would do something like that. And now they're like, oh yeah, we might have to close our doors on this brand new hospital. What? So we'll see what happens there. If they're going to close their doors, why not stay in the old one? But that's me. Poverty is a big problem in rural areas. Not all, but it is. There's a big opioid crisis. Now, this is where I have to say, not everywhere. I don't see it around here. And that's where I'd say your rural areas are different in different parts of the country. You cannot do a broad brush and standardize it all. Some things I think are pretty standard, like generally rural areas are religious, generally they're conservative, but in other areas, not so much. There is a lack of employment in rural areas. Just where do you work? There aren't a lot of jobs. That's why people leave. That's why now we have a lot of people were coming back to western North Dakota. Because there were jobs in the oil industry. Now, of course, that's dried up. That's changing. Internet, I think I mentioned that one already. It just blows my mind that my parents in rural Pennsylvania cannot get high-speed internet without paying an arm and a leg. For me, it was a no-brainer. And I'm a lot more rural than they are. Education. Nobody wants to come teach in a rural area. And there's an attitude in some rural areas of, well, what's the point? No jobs anyway. Because they can't conceive of a bigger world. I'm going to go off on a little tangent here, but I think it's worth it. I know of a town where they can't find a math teacher. They had one. Another school district poached him away. They can't find him. So they're looking at, how do we teach math to our entire high school? They're looking at some kind of an online program because they just simply can't find one. They've had some difficulties with an English teacher. Or not English, sorry, they have English. Music teacher. I think, from what I understand, they had to hire somebody far less than desirable. In my own town, we had trouble finding an art teacher. We are lucky in my town. We have all of our positions filled by qualified people, but there aren't that many of them. So teachers just do not want to teach in these rural areas. And who can blame them? Rural areas that are very conservative and been fed by a steady diet of Rush Limbaugh, saying that the schools are trying to brainwash them. I mean, every time we have a public meeting at the school, you hear that. It's just like, do you know anything about the school here, or are you just spouting off what you hear on right-wing media? But right-wing media has very successfully demonized public education. A lot of rural towns sprang up around a natural resource. In North Dakota, a lot of them sprang up because of the railroad, putting stops for water for the steam engines. In West Virginia, you see a lot of those small towns sprung up around coal mines. So extraction of natural resources is one. Well, when the natural resource dries up, then what? Around here, trains don't stop for water anymore. So a lot of these towns that were built for the trains are empty. I took you through one. It's called Griffin. Nothing there. Marmarth used to have the big turntable and roundhouse. Not anymore. So, a lot of change there. Farming. That's what's gotten a lot of the North Dakota and South Dakota towns. Farms used to be a lot smaller because the equipment just couldn't manage a large area. So you had a lot more farms. All the farmers would have lots of kids to work the farm. They might even hire people to work the threshing, because farming used to be very labor intensive. And not anymore. The farms continue to get bigger and bigger. Automation more and more. Right now, there are automated combines. Don't even need somebody sitting in the combine to harvest. Now, in fairness, right now the technology only really works if you have a pretty good, decent, flat field, which we don't have in my part of North Dakota. But it's coming. So then you need even less people. Heck, a big business could run that. I was stunned when I went down to Texas a few years ago by the gigantic feedlots there. Cows wandering around without a blade of grass in sight. They're fed, feed. And it's all automated machinery. Around here, the cows go out in the field, they frolic in the grass. They do get sold, and I guess they're fattened up in a feedlot before they're butchered, but, And there's nothing in rural areas for young people. You want a job. You want to make some money. You want other young people around. I feel bad for the young teachers who come here because it's just like, there's not a lot for you here. And I was in that boat when I was young, living in that town that lost its grocery store. It's like, well, what do? Go to the bar? I'm not much of a bar person, although I'm drinking something you could find in a bar. Of course, if I ordered red wine in that bar, I'd probably get called a fag or something, but whatever. I'm going to have to switch to something else here because I got to start my chicken. I cook it in the crock pot and then shred it. And I cook it in beer. It's a Chilada something Clamato Budweiser thing. It gives it some heat and some flavor. So tomorrow morning I'll be shredding it, and that'll make good sandwiches while it's so hot. But gotta pause again. Now I don't want to paint rural America as some depressing land, really backward land or anything like that. Like I said, I live here. But I think a lot of politicians, like Hillary Clinton, just don't get it. What happened with Donald Trump isn't so much, he was an awful candidate. So was Hillary Clinton. They were terrible candidates. A lot of why Donald Trump won wasn't because people were so enamored of him. I mean, they're around. But mostly why he won is people saying, hey, things aren't going right. We need somebody different. And they were willing to ignore a lot of his faults. Now, he does play into certain biases that are found not just in rural America, sadly, just all over. The evangelical crowd seems willing to overlook everything. His evangelical, Evangelical Advisory Council has stood by him. They were all with him when he just signed his proclamation about, hey, let's do Sunday as a day of prayer for the Harvey victims, because that'll do a lot of good. And, you can make hay out of it by not doing anything except signing a proclamation. And that's another thing you'll find in rural areas. You'll find a lot more religion. Now, I will tell you part of why that is. Partly it's cultural, of course, but another part, when you're in a rural area, there's often not a lot of social outlets. So, religion, the church becomes an important part of the community because it's a social outlet. In the city, you might have clubs and things. In the country, in the rural areas, not so much. A few people have seen my gardening videos and asked about the local gardening club. Well, guess what? There isn't one. If I lived in Rapid City, I'm sure there would be one, because there'd be enough people to sustain it. A lot of these small towns maybe had these civic organizations, but our culture in general just we're not joining as much as we used to. So these clubs have dried up. Their members are all old, or the club is gone. We've changed a lot as a country, and it's really affected rural America. Now, I'm coming up on, speaking of rural America, I'm coming up on Keystone, South Dakota here eventually. I might have jumped the gun mentioning that, but that's what the exit sign was about. Keystone is very small. I didn't even bother looking up its population because it's tiny. Keystone is very touristy. I mean, this town exists purely because of tourism. You'll get a glimpse of that in this video, but yeah. Alright, I was curious. I looked it up. 330 people, thereabouts. More than I thought. Anyway, we've been traveling the Mount Rushmore Road, which is Highway 16. Right up here, I'm going to turn off on Highway 16A. The bridge, though, that I'm going to pass under is really something. I'm glad I got this. I would like a picture of it. This isn't the kind of road you pull off on and take a picture, so I haven't. But it's an impressive wood structure. It kind of goes along with the bridges you'll see if you take the Iron Mountain Highway, which I have done, and you've seen the video. So I'm pulling off on an exit here to get onto 16A. Looks like it's a left-hand exit, I can't remember. But this is the bridge. Wood. Kind of attractive. See, I told you that was a nice bridge. Anyway, on the rural thing, one of the other things that has tended to happen in a lot of rural areas is they're very Caucasian. So people who aren't exposed to a lot of other cultures, just because of the isolation, And they're perhaps frightened of them, perhaps just don't understand them, threatened by different sexual orientations or the transgender. They just don't. They don't understand it, and that's human nature. We are often fearful of the things we don't understand. And one thing we have going for us now that wouldn't have been true at another time is internet, TV, movies are making us more aware of what's out there. Now, the limitation there is with the internet, it's easy to isolate yourself in a bubble. Only take in voices that you like. Like only listening to Rush Limbaugh or only watching Fox News. And those are media outlets that play to the biases of all too many people who live in these rural areas. So anyway, what I hope to do in this series of videos is talk about different facets of rural life, both from personal experience and from research. Talk a little bit about why it is the way it is and how it really is, and sometimes talk about how my experience differs, because again, we can't say all of rural America is this unified blob. Every different area of rural America is a little bit different. Some are very different. And it's just like any group, we can't stereotype. I will probably talk about politics, and you know where my politics lie. Oh, neat tunnel. I forgot this was on this video. I will, but I'm more interested in the culture than I am one particular president, because in 4 years, maybe 8 years, but hopefully not, this president will be gone and a new one will be running, and he won't matter. Culture takes a lot longer to change. So I want to talk about rural American culture, the role of religion, like I said, the opioid crisis, which isn't an issue here, but it is an issue, employment, the isolation. There are just so many different things to it. Alright, but we're coming into Keystone here. I'm going to turn onto what's called the Old Hill City Road, and that makes a good place to stop. The Old Hill City Road is different from what we've been driving so far. So, I hope that was interesting. Hope this entices you to come back, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.